A lot of times I hear people say that they really want to try the carnivore diet. They've heard about the benefits and they believe that carnivore would probably fix their health problems. But what a lot of people don't realize is that even if you really want to do carnivore, there's probably a part of you that has a lot of fears about actually doing it. Like, oh my gosh, if I do this diet and it really does resolve my health issues, well then will I just have to eat meat for the rest of my life? It's almost like you'd rather not know because the thought of eating just meat until the day you die is so terrifying. The very first video I shared on this channel was my personal story of how I came to the carnivore diet. I told you that I initially did carnivore for 2 weeks from a place of desperation, just as a crazy experiment, and it made all of my health problems go away. Then 2 weeks later, I unexpectedly fell off the wagon at a birthday party and my bleeding came back right away. And I decided that night that I was going to do carnivore for 3 months. Well, between that birthday party and the decision I made that night, I did something called a fear inventory. It was an exercise that a business coach I worked with at the time had me do. And in this exercise, you write down a desire that you have, something that you really want for yourself or for your life. And then you write completely unfiltered all the fears that you have beneath that desire, the fears you have about it actually coming true. This was a hard thing to push myself to do the first time I did it because I thought, why would anyone have fears around the things they want? That's ridiculous. But fear of success, fear of the things we desire is a very real thing. I actually remember getting on the computer and typing in, is self-sabotage real? And I read through a bunch of studies and papers on it in the PubMed NIH database. Self-sabotaging behaviors are very documented in the literature. And the cliche human behavior is that we tend to stick with what we know, even if it's not a great situation, rather than face the fear of the unknown. So going back to when I got home after that birthday party, while I was in all of that physical pain from the cake and ice cream, I deeply desired to commit to carnivore for 90 days. I really wanted that for myself. But I also noticed that I felt resistant too. So I did a fear inventory exercise, and I want to read to you what I wrote down that day. I wrote, I deeply desire to commit to 90 days of complete carnivore, but I fear this will change my life and I will never want to go back. I fear that holidays and celebrations will never be the same. I fear this is already true from the past 2 weeks of carnivore that I've done. I fear that I will constantly feel inclined to explain, defend, or justify myself and my food choices. I fear that in order to avoid having to explain myself, I won't go out with people for 3 months and I'll be lonely. I fear that this experiment will do exactly what I think it will, and I will have no choice but to be a weirdo carnivore for the rest of my life. I fear that I will go crazy from food boredom. I fear that the FOMO will be unbearable. I fear I will be permanently axing an easy way for people to bond with me. I fear that I won't get over the grief of not wanting to eat at all the restaurants I used to love. I fear arguments or awkwardness with my vegan friends. I fear that even if I know this way of eating is right for me, that I won't have the strength to not care what other people think. I fear somehow being rejected or not included because of this. I fear the new person this will inevitably make me become. I fear the fact that I will not be able to unknow or unfeel what my body is going to tell me. I fear the loss of my blissful ignorance. I fear that I can't handle the possibility of having to explain to people why I'm not eating or drinking what they are. I fear that no one will want to come to Thanksgiving anymore. I fear that my family will say I've ruined their favorite holidays. I fear they will be upset that I no longer want to participate in family food traditions. I fear coming out and eventually having to tell people in my life that I'm a carnivore after they notice that I only eat meat. I fear those awkward conversations. I fear that this will take away opportunities to connect with people if I don't want to eat or drink what they are. I fear that this will bring tons of changes into my life, and I fear that I don't even know what some of them are. I fear this will cement another step toward a new career and evolution and put the final nail in the coffin in my business that I have loved so much. Even though it was almost 5 years ago, I remember so well what it felt like to write all of that. I was so worked up that I was covered in sweat and burning up from the inside. My cheeks were on fire. I remember that in some ways the fear seemed so silly, but my body made it very clear that it all felt very real to me. I was uncovering all of these fears that I had underneath this thing that I deeply desired to do. And though at first I was shocked at all these subconscious fears that came out on that piece of paper, I knew they were real. To be honest, some of these fears that I wrote did come true. I did have a family member say that I've ruined the holidays. I have had certain friendships fade. I did have to figure out a different way of entertaining and socializing. Carnivore does change your life. Not quite as dramatically as I had feared, but I think there comes a time when you have to come to terms with that your life will look different. It's also interesting to look back at this list because so many of the fears I had were about how other people would take this. This is something I have struggled with in general and have had to work on. So in a sense, this was just another manifestation of that fear of judgment that I had to become aware of and deal with. This exercise can actually be really illuminating and personal in that way because you might not have these types of things on your list at all if you've never struggled with caring what other people think. Another thing that my fear inventory revealed is that I had a lot of preconceived notions about what life would look like if this carnivore thing actually became something that was here to stay in my life. And fortunately, I was wrong about what life would look like continuing to do carnivore. My life is so much better now. I had no idea the space that food took up in my life, the time and energy I spent in the struggle, and what a burden it all was. I want you to think about what assumptions you've made about what's going to happen if you follow a carnivore diet. Usually people's first reaction to this is, oh, it'll be great. It'll fix all my problems. But then lurking under the surface, there tends to be a lot of subconscious thoughts and fears for people here. There was a client I had who we figured out that she had this idea in her head that if she did 30 days of carnivore, it would change her health so much that she'd feel obligated to do it for the rest of her life. And so she kept sabotaging herself. And if I were operating by that thought myself, I would self-sabotage too. I personally never say that I'm definitely going to be carnivore for the rest of my life. That kind of thought, like, oh my gosh, am I only going to eat meat for the rest of my life? For most people, tends to do more harm than good. I probably will always do carnivore, or at least mostly meat for the rest of my life, because when I stray too far from the diet, my health problems come back. But this is different from telling myself that I'm locked into doing carnivore until the day I die. I've talked so much on my podcast about a lot of the great things that come from doing this diet, but I don't think it's coincidence that the time I actually committed to carnivore was after I addressed the subconscious fears I had about really doing it. If you feel this may be at play in your own life, I encourage you to do a fear inventory yourself. And I would love you to share below if you have struggled with any of the fears that I mentioned. The mental aspect of our eating cannot be overstated. So it's really important to take the time to look at what's going on in your head so that you can move forward and change your health and your life for the better. If you want more videos that support the carnivore diet and help you overcome the temptation of modern foods, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And also sign up for my email newsletter and receive my free guide, Joanne's Party Survival Guide for not flying off the rails and eating all the things. You can click the link below or go to www.theroadtocarnivore.com/guide.